I'm not really on Twitter anymore, which is probably bad for my career, but good for my life in general. I've seen people complaining a little bit about how much the Johnny Sexton and Rico Ioane thing has been discussed. And I've certainly had a few messages to that effect about the podcast as well. People being like, what's the point? It's boring. Johnny's just flogging his book. And I'm like, come off it, like, because this is compelling to loads of people. You've got the inner workings of one of the greatest Irish sports people of all time laid bare on paper, which is valuable and I would say subjectively interesting, right? And if two lads from one of the great modern rivalries in rugby are airing their dirty laundry as publicly and Sexton and Ioane have been, and you claim it's boring, I think you're just trying to be cool. I think it's like being a hip hop fan and pretending you're not paying attention to the Kendrick Lamar Drake feud. Like, oh, like what Little Uzi doing is way more interesting. Get a grip, all right? I will timestamp this if you want to skip this section of the conversation, but we're going to chat about rugby books in general. And I think we've had enough boring rugby autobiographies over the year, Birch. Yours certainly wasn't one of them. And maybe we've turned a corner now with what we've seen of Sexton's book. I know you've been on Dan Biggar's book, yeah, Keith Earls' book as well. What do you want to chat about first?
Well, I actually moved downstairs because I didn't want everyone to see my bookcase with all the bad autobiographies that are there. No, look at I like I've said this a few times. I like personalities, I like characters. And obviously I was lucky enough to play with Johnny, so I know his personality and character incredibly well. But yet I still am interested because I'm sure in his book, and even in Kimmage's extracts from it yesterday, I found out more than I know, or things I wouldn't ask him. You know what I mean, about his childhood, about influence on his life, his mindset. And then obviously the extracts in the Sunday Times are giving you the background to, the only stuff, I think the Champions Cup final, the argument with Jacko Paper will be dealt with. And that's like, at the end of the day, all he's doing is giving his opinion and his feelings about how it played out. You can judge whether you like that or not. But like, I don't think in the book, I don't think he's really having a go at Eoin. He's just telling what happened, and then people get outraged that he told what happened. But as I said, I'm fascinated by that. And Dan Biggar's book, like Dan is someone I've read Dan's. I haven't read Johnny's yet. I think it comes out next week, the 10th. But Biggar is someone that I played against, coached against. I admire, and he wrote an honest book about his childhood, like things like I didn't know him and Lee Halfpenny kind of basically were goal kicking from 10 or 11 together at night, and their mums were in trees and bushes trying to get the balls back, you know what I mean? And then obviously an insight into just stories, like I said in the yesterday, like they bumped into just stupid stuff, but I bumped into Romain Poix and the French officials after Wales played France in Rome at a nightclub, and next thing they have Romain Poix topless doing press ups, and he didn't get enough press ups or whatever. I don't know what he said he could get, but he didn't manage to do it. So Richard Hibbard and Paul James have him upside down off a balcony, one ankle each. You know what I mean? And that happens, Well, it happens less and less now, but it did happen back in the good old days. Insights into the merger and like obviously I'm interested in Welsh politics and rugby politics, and his feelings on Gatland, and maybe Gatland didn't take the player side around wage strikes. He was just very honest, and like I want that. I want to read a book where I actually learn more about the games or the seasons that I remember, and the players I admire. And Johnny's will be the same. No doubt. I think Peter Riley has done a great job on it. Like if Paul Kimmage says it's a brilliant book, I mean that's he's hard to please, and he's read a lot of crap autobiographies. My autobiography, the way I looked at mine was like I used to like I've obviously looked at O'Connell's and O'Driscoll's and Wilkinson's and Martin Johnson's and all the big names, but I also have a load of books that are about journeymen, which I felt I was, and I wrote that book, and I didn't write the book. My ghostwriter Liam Hayes, basically I met him every Wednesday night for coffee for the whole season. And we chatted, and he asked me questions, and then basically he produced the book effectively, right? And I made a commitment that I wouldn't change or take out anything, because if I said this in December, that was how I felt in December, and if I was pissed off with myself or a teammate or Checa or whatever, and obviously I was critical of Checa, and in hindsight, 6 months, a year, 10 years later, I could easily take that out, because I don't feel that anger towards him now. But that wasn't how I felt at the time. So like I said, like I enjoy trying to understand how people feel. And Murray got an email about Conor Nyland's book, which is about tennis, and again, the reason I enjoy that is he's not journeyman. To get to the level he got to is incredible, but it's something. It's a professional sports person who a lot of us as kids crave to be or think it's the dream job, and you actually see a lot of the difficulties, the lowlights, the stresses around it. Obviously, there's highlights as well, and I don't think he or most of us would regret it for a second. But it's to try and give the reader or the listener an insight into that, and I admire those, and I hate autobiographies that say nothing, that are. I just think it's a joke. Why write one? You know what I mean? And as you say, Earls's was great. I think Sexton's will be very good. Biggar's is good. Yeah, and rather than actually get upset and cry about it, well, what do we want? Do we want? Okay, obviously some people would prefer they didn't write them. That's obvious from the social media side of it. But for the ones who do write it, at least don't bag them for actually giving their side of things. That's how I see it.
Yeah, it was Mark O'Connor with the email asking for a 5-minute review of Conor Nyland's autobiography from both yourself and Murray on arguably the busiest podcast week of the year so far. So we don't have time for that, but we absolutely do have time to say it's an unbelievable book, ghostwritten by our colleague Gavin Cooney, and nominated as well for the William Hill Book Award, which is the big one. It's on the long list for that and could go far. But Murray, I thought there was loads of interesting aspects to Paul Kimmage's sit down with Sexton, which revolves around the book to some degree, and in which he explains why he decided to write it, and also expresses regrets already about aspects that he has written. But like a little tidbit that I loved was that his wife Laura had been watching a game with his son Luca at some point semi-recently, I think, and Luca had referred to the referee as a disgrace, and Laura being like, where's he gotten that from? But there's an extract from the book within this Kimmage interview as well, which we wanted to discuss. I think 3 of us found it interesting, as did anyone who read the piece. And it's on the topic of Stuart Lancaster and Leinster under his tenure. And Sexton writes, Stu was strong on leadership, on communication, on building relationships. He got us thinking about the different personality types within the group. One test we did, which involved answering 100 multiple choice questions, grouped everyone into 4 personality types, differentiated by color. Blues are deep thinkers, analytical. Greens are cool, laid back, and patient. Yellows are extroverted, fun. And reds are strong-willed, drivers, highly competitive. When all the answers had been collated, Stu announced that we had lots of the various colors, but only one pure red. There was a pause as everyone looked over at me, and then we all exploded into laughter. It was funny for sure, but it was also an eye-opener. I was now the outlier, and it was me that needed to change. And Sexton goes on to say that Sean O'Brien was the only one who got a result approaching red on that spectrum. I should ask you where you think you'd feature yourself, but let's.
Well, I've actually done that testing. I've done that testing in the past. I'm a green, very much a green, and it was funny. Like, it's almost bad because you think, oh, that guy is a red, and like that's why we maybe don't get along perfectly. I remember at the time doing it. There was a teammate who I didn't get on well with, and then are completely opposite colors or whatever it was. But yeah, it's a fascinating extract, and it's no surprise at all, is it? Like, that's absolutely Sexton. And he goes on to say about how many, when he first broke into Leinster, there were probably way more characters like him. I suppose the game has changed really, and he was able to change with it. Like, towards the end, we discussed this when it was coming towards retirement, how yeah, he's obviously still unbelievably spiky. He's obviously still in referees' ears. Less so though towards the end. He appeared to be enjoying it more. He appeared, relax is the wrong word, but he appeared to be embracing just the journey of it more so than just the winning towards the end. So like, it was fascinating to see that change in his career. And yeah, again, in that interview, in the Alex Lowe interview in the Times in the UK, there was loads of really good stuff in there as well. Like, it's not even the book, it's just an interview, but he's given lots of different insights. Again, he doubled down on how good Andy Farrell is. He says he's the best I've worked with on both sides of the ball. Absolutely brilliant technically. So great insights there. He said he actually texted Andy Farrell when he got confirmed as the 2025 Lions coach. And it's not clear if he's actually messing here. He says, to Farrell, if I play for my club, would you consider me? And Farrell just wrote back, no. And then they kind of leave it there, and you think he actually would have probably come out of retirement. His 7-a-side games with Rob Kearney and Fergus McFadden, and he's breaking it down like it is a big deal to them. Absolutely. Even the habits of watching rugby matches and pausing everything, and his wife's telling him what's about to happen in the games. Yeah, so it's all been really interesting. So I can't wait to get my hands on the final product. But just on the books, like, you're so right, Birch. Often those, like, I have a dislike of this genre because I've read sports autobiographies, because I read so many bad ones, and it actually pisses me off because I think it's disrespectful to the reader, because you're charging them money and you're giving them nothing. Like, it's supposed to be an insight when you're literally just recounting what they could read on Wikipedia at times. It really bothers me. So especially for higher profile players, because that's not the trend, when they give something of themselves and insights into long careers that we feel we've known a lot about, it's brilliant. And then I love books that are just more under the radar. Conor Nyland's is a great example. The other side of a sport that seems so glamorous, and all we know is Nadal and Federer and how cool and slick their careers are and how brilliant they are, of course. But even seeing Nyland's perspective on them is fascinating. And Birch's book is a good example of it as well. Like, there's another one called Confessions of a Rugby Mercenary. It's quite old at this stage. I've mentioned it a few times. John Daniel. It's just brilliant because he's not a star. You never heard of him, and it's just like gritty and really, really honest. So even though it's old, I highly recommend that. I love those books there's a number of examples in football. The Miracle of Sangel de Castro. I'm probably getting that wrong. Where he goes off to the Serie C team and he spends the season with them. That's brilliant because it's so real. And then when a ghostwriter and a player can come together and give you a real version of someone who's really famous, I think that's a really big achievement. Obviously, Andre Agassi is the prototype for this field. He set a massively high standard, but I think you're right. I think people are less accepting of it now. I'm not going to go spend 25 quid just because you're famous. If it's boring, it's actually going to leave me with a bad impression of you. So I think players are aware of that.